Right, good morning and welcome to Moncast on Monday, except of course this is Tuesday because of Easter Monday. I have to say my guest Chris did remind me of that and I'd totally forgotten. So Chris, good morning. So Chris, you're head of sales and of sports intelligence at DataHub. So what does DataHub do?
So at DataHub we have various platforms that provide intelligence back to the sector. So we have been in the process over the last 5 years or so of collecting data from the sector, and many of the people listening to this will be involved with it already. And that data comes in a kind of aggregated format, and we produce intelligence based on that data back to the operators to help them with their business decision making, and also to help the sector with people like UK Active and Moving Communities report that comes out on an annual basis, that aggregated view of sector data. So very heavily involved in all physical activity sort of channels with the DataHub.
Okay, so that's data collecting the data. What about you? What are you doing to remain fit and healthy? I saw you hitting a 5-ball challenge the other day.
Yeah, I get in the garden a little bit and hit some golf balls. So yeah, that was a nice challenge from Gordon Watson. So thank him for that, and I have passed it on. So we've seen some interesting videos. But yeah, listen, I've got 2 young kids. So I've got a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. So you don't need to go to the gym too often when you've got those guys running around. So luckily we have some space in the garden. So there's been lots of rugby tots challenges and those kind of things going on in the garden. So yeah, swing a club every now and again, and certainly a bit of activity with the boys.
Good to hear, good to hear. Just before the lockdown, Data produced a quick piece that showed how participation and usage was dropping as we approached the Friday lockdown. What do you think the sector learned from that piece of information?
Yeah, it was really interesting watching that unfold, to be honest, because I mean, in January we saw a fairly steady increase year on year, around 4%. But then as the news kind of evolved and broke around the COVID virus coming closer to us, and obviously we saw some deaths in early March, which was very tragic. And we saw kind of a rapid decline in that. So I think from the first 3 weeks in March, we went from a 7 to 14 to 40% decline in throughput parts on year from facilities just before that sort of lockdown. So I think it really kind of highlights the sensitivity of our customer base and how alert we need to be to that sensitivity. So there's obviously fears around the virus, and obviously the media plays a big part in that. And we've seen numerous trends over the years with something popping up in the media and starting a new trend. And I think, you know, the sector obviously, or the members obviously responded to that media coverage. So I think understanding kind of the habits of the demographics that we work within and how their fears are triggered is something that we can probably learn for the recovery effort as well. So we can take that kind of information on board and those kind of trends to help with the recovery planning.
Okay, yeah, that's really useful, and that is going to be the theme of our conversations with people. It's about the recovery, it's about what can we do about it. So I suppose that moves us now into this point where I guess we're not getting a lot of participation data and insight, but what do clients need to think about so that they are ready for that recovery position?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Obviously, there's a lot of webinars floating around at the moment about this kind of thing and covering this topic. So the general consensus is those seem to be following the same kind of themes. And we found while the dust was settling through the initial shutdown period that we were very much having kind of reactive requests from clients around what was the immediate operational and financial challenges around this, and how could we sort of understand that sector wide. And we're working with UK Active at the moment to push a kind of white paper out on that to give some more information. But I think then we really move into that sort of recovery phase, and people are now starting, and we've got a lot of projects that have actually been triggered off in the last week or two around that recovery modelling, so really planning for that reopening. And that involves everything from reviewing all of the services that you're delivering, how profitable they are potentially, whether they're valid to your market sector. So understanding again the demographics around your facility are really, really important. And then I think we're kind of into that sort of reform and rebuilding phase as well as a sector. You know, we've got a great opportunity here to re-evolve as a sector and really decide whether we're a leisure sector or a health sector as well. And I think that's an interesting topic that's come up. But certainly reviewing some of those opportunities for the future and for the business growth and adapting to that change are the kind of things that we're finding clients are asking us for and are certainly valued in this time frame.
Okay, that's really interesting because actually we spoke to Martin Allison yesterday. We're going to actually publish, it's been published now. And Martin has a piece around renewal, which I guess is the reform conversation that you had.
Absolutely.
What sort of insight and data have we got that maybe is driving us towards thinking about actually how do we do reform or renewal rather than just do what we've always done?
Yeah, well, I think it's a case of looking at obviously occupancy and participation rates for things that we've had historically. Within DataHub, we have a lot of trend data around activity and particular demographics that are doing particular activities. So we can look at those kind of things in great detail. And I think really understanding the profile of your base is very, very important. But looking outside of the box as well, I think at different opportunities. So this term optionality is kind of been floating around. And looking at the different kind of things that you could do as a facility operator. So not necessarily coming back on reopen with the same things that you had when you closed. You know, we really need to move forward and step forward from where we were when we closed and become smarter and stronger as a sector. So looking at the different kind of activities that maybe you haven't thought about before, or different demographics maybe you haven't thought about before, are definitely things to consider. Also, there's going to be a whole new set of cohorts to look at. I think one of the fear factors around the COVID virus has obviously been sort of respiratory issues around it, and people with respiratory issues having a higher risk. So, you know, there's a target group there that we really need to help, and I think some focus around that is going to be needed as well moving forward.
Okay, it's really interesting when you talk about that optionality and looking at different ways. Of course, the digital platforms have absolutely flown. Operators are offering free digital exercise and things like that. Does DataHub get a record of people who have taken part in activity digitally?
Yes, something we're working on, to be fair.
Okay.
We have interfaces with some of our partners. So Technogym, for example, we have an interface with their wellness products. So we'll get some understanding of participation there. We have a relationship with Les Mills and NEMD UK as well. And obviously the partners who have been pushing their own sort of home learning through microsites or through their own apps. There's triggered bits of data that we can pick up from those for sure, and certainly something Uku and the team are investigating currently as to how big a picture that can be. I mean, obviously moving forward, there was a bit of a knee jerk, I think, in the sector around throwing things out really quickly, and businesses need to be careful how they adapt to that moving forward when we start to reopen again. You know, that's the kind of thing we can't just turn off. So from the sector's perspective, it definitely needs some sharper monitoring. I mean, the biggest transformational change factor we've had in a generation has been the COVID-19 virus. So it's really forced us into a change scenario. So we're adapting pretty quickly to that, and we've got some data that we're putting together. But certainly we'll be looking to the system providers to help us with that and provide us with the information that we need to create that insight. But and that's how DataHub works. So yeah, we look forward to that.
No, that's absolutely fascinating. And if we get to something before we are all back, it'd be really interesting to have a chat again about what you've seen as a result of that data you've been able to collect from those people. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think the consensus is that we're going to be having a kind of phased return to reopening anyway. And I know some of the sort of Far Eastern countries have been sort of in and out of lockdown over the last few months and continue to be so. So I think very much those the analysis on that, which we're working hard on at the moment, will be coming out to the sector, and hopefully it will help inform some of those decisions on that reopen strategy. And that's really what we want to help sort of clients with now, and what they should be thinking about is that reopen strategy, and how do we need to think about it? How do we need to continue? So yeah, it's going to be interesting times.
Yeah, good. And I'm particularly keen on thinking outside of what I consider to be the facilities, the boxes that we take part in activity, and looking at sport from a community point of view, from an elite point of view, and that type of stuff. And I know DataHub does work with a lot of national governing bodies. So have you had anything of interest out of the national governing bodies in the past few weeks?
Yeah, it's interesting. Not my field in the business, but yeah, most of them obviously from the club's perspective. You know, the clubs are obviously closed, so re-triggering participation in their particular sports is a key focus for them, and obviously Sport England have supported that as well. So you know, Tim's post a few weeks ago or a couple of weeks ago was obviously supporting that. So I mean, a lot of the projects that we're working on with the NGBs are going ahead as normal, because fundamentally they're still trying to drive participation. They're still trying to facilitate that sort of digital transformation and capture. So we're still live with most of those projects, but certainly the challenge is going to be reintroducing people to physical activity for their particular sport. That's definitely the challenge ahead. But again, understanding the data that's available and understanding those different cohorts that take part in your activities, which is now sort of more important than ever for the NGBs to understand, will help them develop those strategies for recovery. But yeah, again, very challenging for those guys as NGBs and community sport facilities. You know, that we know there's not a lot of funding in community sport anyway. It's very much volunteer based. And I think there's a big hope that a lot of those volunteers will obviously come back to work within those community sport organisations as well. So hopefully we can drive that forward as a sector and not lose anybody.
Excellent. Chris, that has been really, really useful. It's amazing how quickly 11 minutes disappears and flies. Is there anything else you want to say before I close the conversation today?
No, I think, listen, you know, we do have this great opportunity as a sector, and in this rebuild and reimagining how we do things. And I think we've seen from the COVID virus and the press, you know, data is really important here in the decision making. You know, it's not life and death, the decisions that we're going to be making in terms of the strategies for our facilities, but the data side is really, really important. So, you know, if we can help in any way, and if we can advise on how you can use that data more effectively, then, you know, we're more than happy to do so. But certainly use it, and you know, the advice would be to make as many sound strategically based decisions as you possibly can. So yeah, data is going to be key, I think.
Okay, excellent. Well, we'll tag you into the text that goes out with our social media. So if people want to find you, they'll just be able to click on those links and find both you and the DataHub Club. So Chris, thank you very much for that. Just for our viewers, next week, we're going to be talking to Christian Harris from Slip Safety Services around cleanliness and how important that's going to be going forward. But for the moment, Chris, thank you so much for your time today. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Catch up.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, David. Bye-bye.